Welcome to Washington. I'm Laura Ingraham, and this is the Ingraham Angle. All right, we got Matt Lauer, John Conyers, tax reform, Kate Steinle, and now Michael Flynn. What an explosive news cycle to end the week. Of course, dominating today's headlines, National Security Advisor Michael Flynn's guilty plea to lying to the FBI and the Russia probe. But do the facts actually merit the wild conclusions being tossed around, especially by one ABC reporter in particular? We're going to get to that. Also, we're going to shed light on another underreported story, whether Hillary Clinton got special treatment from the FBI in that email case, and how House Republicans are digging for the truth now. We'll speak with the congressman leading the charge to hold the FBI accountable, and it's about time. Plus, more on that Black Lives Matter plot of a Christmas boycott against white-owned businesses. That's a Merry Christmas. But first, the growing fallout over the Kate Steinle verdict and the shock and outrage over the acquittal of her killer on murder charges. It all boils down to this. Kate's killer should have never been in the country. Jose Inez Garcia Zarate, who was previously deported from the U.S. 5 times, was in a position to kill only because of a San Francisco insane sanctuary city status. And by the way, he's hardly alone. 22% of the federal inmate population in California are suspected illegal immigrants. 121 criminal aliens released by ICE between 2010 and 2014 were later charged with homicide. That's blood on their hands, my friends. And 2,139 DACA recipients have lost permits because of criminal or public safety concerns. Now, everybody wants to say the Dreamers represent the best of the young people in the country. You know, every Dreamer is a valedictorian or saves cats from trees. But is that true? Well, they've experienced the painful and personal consequences of loss and death due to our insane immigration policies. I'm talking about the victims of crimes, because they've experienced these personal consequences of loss and death and life and death lost. Don Rosenberg is joining us in Westlake Village, California. He lost his son, the 25-year-old Drew, when he was killed in 2010 by a Honduran who entered the country illegally but earned protected status. And joining us from Chicago, Brian McGann's brother, Dennis, was killed in 2010 by a drunk driving illegal immigrant. And in Phoenix, Steve Ronenbeck's son, 21 years old, Grant, was working overnight on a shift at a convenience store when he was basically executed by an illegal immigrant over a pack of cigarettes. Gentlemen, I wanted to talk to all of you since this Kate Steinle verdict came down. And I think, Steve, I want to go to you first because, as I understand it, your son's murderer is awaiting trial at this moment. Your reaction to the Kate Steinle acquittal yesterday?
You know, I was absolutely stunned. And after that, it was just heartbroken for the Steinle family. I know that I can speak for Don and Brian and all the other victims' families that our hearts go out to the Steinle family. It's just a travesty. You know, this man gave several different stories as to what actually happened. He never gave an honest answer. They still don't know exactly how he got the gun, but then they acquit him of murder or even manslaughter. I don't know. I can't wrap my head around it.
Bob, I want to go to you. The loss, whether it's a drunk driving illegal immigrant, a hit and run illegal immigrant, involuntary manslaughter, although this creep didn't even get that in the Steinle case. He's getting off basically scot-free in a couple more months of time after time served. What does this tell you about DACA and all the concern now about the DACA recipients in the United States? You saw those figures. You know them well.
Well, I got to tell you.
Oh, yeah, let's go to Bob on that. Let's go to Bob on that.
Brian, you mean? You want
I'm
me?
sorry, let's go to Brian on that. Sorry, Brian.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's outrageous, and it could have happened here in Chicago as well, because we were one of the leading sanctuary cities that became a model for the country. I met the Steinleys a few years ago. They're wonderful people. My heart goes out to them. They fought the good fight, as we all have. It's just a travesty of justice. So many of us can lay claim to the proverbial insult to injury, and it continues almost every day. There's hundreds of thousands of American family members every day that mourn the loss of their children and their siblings and their spouses. So with the Steinleys, our prayers are with them, and with San Francisco, God help you out there. I don't know what's going on. I went to that pier last summer with my wife just to try to get some sense of what it was like, and it was tragic indeed.
Don, let's go to you. Speaking of San Francisco, your son was in law school in San Francisco back in 2010. He's no longer here to enjoy a holiday season. Your reaction, and then what about, we've heard nothing from Nancy Pelosi, we've heard nothing from Hillary Clinton, nothing from prominent Democrats on this case, zero.
Well, I'll tell you, I wasn't actually shocked in the least bit. I expected this to happen. I live out here. I see what happens every day. So I wasn't shocked at the two acquittals on the murder charges. I was marginally surprised that he didn't get the involuntary manslaughter, particularly since that's what the defense was using as their claim, that it was an accident. But even with that, you know, it's San Francisco, and the jury, you know, it's O.J. Simpson jury. We're not going to convict you no matter what. I will tell you, though, you know, you mentioned Nancy Pelosi, and you can, you know, lay it on all the Democrats. It's inconceivable to me, and I find it reprehensible that they're worried about DACA recipients. I mean, the worst thing that would happen to any of those guys would be they'd get deported. The worst thing that's happened to, you know, Steve and Brian, myself, and so many others is they've lost a loved one. So our position, and you know, there's an organization we started called AVIAC back in June, and we put out a position that DACA should not even be discussed until all the other illegal immigration issues are dealt with. So for them to talk about shutting down the government is just absolutely incredible.
Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer actually threatening to shut down the government because he cares more about handling and caring and the feeding of illegal immigrants than protecting the innocent lives of American citizens and legal immigrants in the United States, because there are plenty of other prospective victims out there because of San Francisco's sanctuary city policies, California's state policies, Chicago's sanctuary city policies, and it goes on and on and on. And to all three of you, I will say this tonight. My heart breaks for you. Our viewers' hearts break for you. My radio listeners. Americans are infuriated by this. And the fact that politicians in both parties don't seal this border, build this wall, get this stuff done to protect us is an abomination. It has been for years, and now with this latest verdict, it's even worse.
Well, you know, Laura, we can't rely on the politicians out in California. They made the mess. So I'm actually announcing a little earlier than we had planned, but we're going to launch an initiative to not only repeal the sanctuary city or the sanctuary state bill that was just passed, but to also create law that requires law enforcement to cooperate with ICE and with federal officers. So I tell you, if anybody wants to look, the site's not really completely done yet, but it FightSanctuaryState.com, and we can really use people's help.
FightSanctuaryState.com. I'll get it on Facebook and Twitter. Well, all right, we'll get it right. I do that too late at night, but we'll get it right on Facebook and Twitter. We got to get the word out. People have to take the power back from the politicians who will not listen. Steve, I want to go to you because when I think about you, you're not too far from Phoenix, correct? You're right near the. Okay. So you're not too far from the border. What do Arizonans, the average person on the street? I don't care if you're Hispanic, white, black. What does the average person on the street think of special treatment being given to people who break our laws and repeatedly come into our country, are deported, come back, commit crimes, and then get a slap on the wrist? Any sense from people in Arizona about this?
You know, a lot of my friends, people I work with, even people that I just meet that recognize me, you know, they're fed up. They're tired of it. It's you know, it's not just the murder of my son or the murder of Marianne Mendoza's son or Don's or Brian's. It's the drugs that are coming across. It's the
human trafficking, all of it.
And the ones that are coming across the border that are taking advantage of our social service systems.
Hospitals, having children here, having multiple children here. You know, we can't call them anchor babies. I'm sorry, but they're here. It's 9 months pregnant. They have their child, and then no one can ever deport them. Look, gentlemen, we're out of time, but I want to say to all of you, we're with you. The people of the country are with you. It's probably of little comfort to you now, given what's happened. But thank you so much for joining us, and we're going to be following every aspect of this case and others like it, sadly, as the days and weeks go on. The impeached Trump media, boy, they're going to tell you that the Flynn guilty plea is the most important story ever. And welcome back to the Ingram Angle. Most in the media went into a feeding frenzy mode earlier today when former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn pled guilty to one count of lying to the FBI over his contacts with Russia's U.S. ambassador during the transition. But we already knew about that single lie. It's what cost Flynn his job after just a few days in the position back in February. So what's the White House reaction tonight? Joining us now with the latest is Fox News Chief Washington Correspondent James Rosen. James, what's going on?
Laura, good evening. Clearly, White House officials tonight are bracing for General Flynn, now actively cooperating with the special counsel, to say all manner of things. And with that in mind, a lawyer for the president has already begun painting Flynn as an unreliable witness, noting that he only served 24 days as White House National Security Advisor and describing him as, quote, an Obama administration official. The false statements involved, said presidential attorney Ty Cobb in a statement, mirror the false statements to White House officials, which resulted in Flynn's resignation in February of this year. Nothing about the guilty plea or the charge implicates anyone other than Mr. Flynn. And Cobb added the conclusion of this phase of the special counsel's work demonstrates again that the special counsel is moving with all deliberate speed and clears the way for a prompt and reasonable conclusion. Flynn now admits he falsely told FBI agents in January that in his phone calls with the Russian ambassador the month before during the transition period, he never asked Sergei Kislyak to refrain from escalation in a diplomatic skirmish with the U.S. at that time. Flynn also falsely claimed not to remember a subsequent call in which Kislyak apprised him that the Russian Federation had indeed refrained from escalation as Flynn had requested. Flynn also admitted having falsely told agents he never asked the Russian ambassador on a separate occasion to vote against a pending UN Security Council resolution that was targeting Israeli settlements. And Flynn falsely told the agents that he never received from Kislyak any indication of Russia's response to that request. Finally, the special counsel got Flynn to admit that he made, quote, materially false statements and omissions on federal disclosure forms about his work as a lobbyist on behalf of Turkish interests. And those admissions, paradoxically, could work against the special prosecutors if they seek to place Flynn on the witness stand against more senior figures, like the president. Because as Ty Cobb's statement shows, any defense counsel will seek to impugn Flynn's credibility on the grounds that he's already admitted lying in the past to federal agents on federal forms. So how should jurors feel comfortable believing him when he's on the witness stand? Laura.
James, thanks so much. And today's Flynn news has the media, of course, going absolutely bonkers. And they're excited about the possibility that this could be curtains for President Trump.
There aren't many more dots after Mike Flynn, right? Your dots go to Kushner and then the president. There really are no other dots here.
This is a case that reaches directly into the heart of the Trump administration, into the Oval Office.
People now who have believed that the president's sort of loose way with information and facts was his best defense now think that the president is in danger and exposed.
I do agree. This is a big moment where if you're on the fence, you start to think, geez, is this whole thing going down? Is it Watergate?
No, to the contrary. Everything's Watergate. Nothing's Watergate when everything's Watergate. Here's how famed former federal prosecutor Andy McCarthy put it, his own perspective in National Review. He said, for all the furor, we have a small potatoes plea in Flynn's case, just as we did in Papadopoulos' case, despite extensive collusion evidence. And of course, joining us now with reaction, former federal prosecutor Joe diGenova and Saul Weisenberg, who served as deputy independent counsel in the Whitewater investigation of Bill Clinton. Okay, Joe, is the truth somewhere between this is worse than Watergate and this is small potatoes? Where are we on this?
Well, it's very important to realize that General Flynn did exactly what Papadopoulos did. He pleaded guilty to conduct that was legal. He lied about conduct that was legal
Explain
to do. All of Flynn's conversations with the ambassador to Russia were perfectly legal during the transition period and even before. It's not a crime to communicate with an ambassador of a foreign country about foreign policy when you are the foreign policy advisor to the incoming president. So I don't know why he lied. It's inconceivable to me. If he had told the truth, there would be no crime, other than the Farah stuff about his failing to register. But this is a foreign agent. This is a nothing burger. After all this time, this is what he gets out of Flynn. It tells me that there's not much there, and it certainly can't involve the president, because the president has the authority to do all the things that he did. And as far as Kushner goes, that if there's anything with Kushner, it involves transactions involving real estate deals 10, 15 years ago.
Saul, you felt it all day long, building. Jared Kushner directed, calls to Russia. First of all, even if that were true, if they were sitting around a table somewhere and Jared Kushner and a bunch of people said, well, we should probably reach out to Russia on this, and find out what's going on with all the Security Council members on this Israeli sanctions thing, because none of us want Israel to have more sanctions put on them. Big deal. So what if he did? Well, as diGenova said, there's nothing wrong with that. You could do that all day long when you're a transition team official.
Well, there's nothing wrong with, quote, communicating with the Russians. In fact, in most instances, there's nothing wrong with a private citizen communicating with the Russians. Now, if you believe what is in the factual basis or statement of the offense of the Flynn papers, they did violate the letter. Conceivably, there was a violation of the language of the Logan Act. And you're hearing a lot about the Logan Act. But as you know, the Logan Act has never been successfully used against anyone. And the last time anyone was even indicted under it was 1852. So if Mueller is thinking of indicting anybody under the Logan Act, to me, and I've been a defender of Mueller, I think he's an honorable guy. But if he is even thinking of prosecuting anybody for violating the Logan Act, I will instantly denounce him, because it will show such bad faith that it's unbelievable to me.
Well, I would agree with that, except here's the problem for Mr. Mueller. You can't violate the Logan Act when you're in the transition team.
Yeah, you're an authorized agent.
Because you're a government employee. You get a green check. When you're on the transition team, you are a special government employee. They can communicate with anybody they want. And I agree with Saul. The Logan Act's never been enforced. And if Mueller were to use it in this case, then if I were the president, I would fire him.
Yeah, now, Andy McCarthy, his point is that if there was some big scheme here, guys, they wouldn't have allowed him to plead to one count of lying to the FBI, which is a great point. I mean, if there was evidence of a scheme of collusion, they wouldn't have had to do the plea this way. And they would have gotten a lot more. So his view is that it's so far, at the very least so far, they don't really have anything on the collusion, conspiracy to influence the election front. They got Flynn, for whatever reason, he decides to lie about conversations that he could have done anyway. So that's the weird thing. Well, I gotta make you guys laugh on a Friday. Okay, this is gonna make you laugh.
I'm ready.
Joy, I know Saul has a great sense of humor. He's very serious, but he has a great sense of humor. Joy Behar heard about the news of the Flynn plea reading an ABC report today on The View. Let's watch.
Welcome back to the show.
Breaking news.
Oh, my God. Oh, breaking news. ABC News' Brian Ross is reporting Michael Flynn promised full cooperation to the Mueller team and is prepared to testify that as a candidate, Donald Trump directed him to make contact with the Russians. Yeah!
Feels like she just won this Publishers Clearinghouse there, guys. But ABC, by the way, had to come out immediately and say this was not during the campaign. This was actually during the transition, but this is the level of, there it is. Yeah, the clarified, I don't have to read the whole thing.
It wouldn't,
Whoops.
it wouldn't, sorry,
Go
it
ahead,
wouldn't
Saul.
even matter if it was in the campaign. Sorry to
You
interrupt.
can do it during the
wouldn't matter if
campaign.
it was in the campaign. There's nothing wrong, quote, with talking to the Russians, all right? It depends on what you say. So, but the earlier point you made, Laura, is very important that Andy McCarthy made. This is very striking to me. The plea agreement says that Flynn is only protected from future prosecution based on items that are in the statement of the offense. That's the key document. There's nothing in the statement of the offense about collusion during the campaign. Nothing. So unless there is a completely separately sealed, completely standalone plea agreement for Flynn that is sealed, which would be almost unheard of, I think Joe will agree with me, it means that Flynn has no knowledge. Flynn, who was a key figure in the campaign, has no knowledge of any collusion with Russia during the campaign, any illegal collusion.
Yeah, you heard DeGeneva, nothing burger, but the well-respected Bob Mueller so far is coming up with very little, in my opinion. But the hyperbolic response by the media, I mean, these people are completely unhinged. The facts are irrelevant. Analysis, irrelevant. Just jump right to the gallows for Trump. That's where they're going. Gentlemen, thank you. And Saul, I knew I could make you laugh. I got it. I got it out of you. And thanks, guys. And we, by the way, wait. Sorry, this is a special alert. Tommy's telling me we actually have, stick around for this agenda, but we have some live footage of Special Counsel Robert Mueller leaving a D.C. Christmas party tonight. There it is. Oh, okay. He's lost some weight. Oh, yeah. He actually, he's, okay, well, looks, okay, there they go. Up next, President Trump wants to make Christmas great again. And on the other hand, there are those dreaming of a black-only commie Christmas. Details next. All right, ready for some humor? Black Lives Matters. That's the humor. No, sorry. Black Lives Matter thinks it can bring down white capitalism by creating a Black Christmas. And their idea is for black consumers to boycott any white-owned stores. So tell me, how is that not racist? And don't people like Hillary Clinton and former President Obama ultimately share some blame for helping legitimize such a radical organization? Just listen.
Black Lives Matter simply refers to the notion that there's a specific vulnerability for African Americans that needs to be addressed.
When people say Black Lives Matter, that doesn't mean blue lives don't matter.
And we do have to stand up and say loudly and clearly, Black Lives Matter.
All right, joining us now for reaction is attorney Anthony Tall. All right, Anthony, you got to educate me on this one. I do not understand this at all. How do you determine, first of all, just as a factual matter, if a business, let's say, is owned by like an Indian guy in a partnership with a white woman, and then maybe has a black co-owner as well, maybe three people own a business together, does that business get boycotted because there's an element other than a black element in the ownership structure? How do you determine that?
Well, I don't know if that's how you focus on the problem. I think you pretty much just focus on what they're saying is that there's black businesses in the black community that need to be supported and need to be encouraged. You know, this is the day of Oprah. This is the day of Blackish. You know, black economic power means something. So what Black Lives Matter is saying is let's just invest in black businesses for this Christmas. Let's make sure we spend our dollar the way that a lot of other ethics groups have spent their dollars for years. So I don't know if the focus is so much on whether or not there's a diversity or multicultural within the business or excluding whites. I think the focus is on let's make sure that our economic dollar is spent in our community and we build entrepreneurship, which is a Republican idea. I'm surprised you don't like that, Laura.
Yeah, well, I actually think it's people want to, Catholics go to Catholic businesses, you know, I don't have any problem with that. My problem is when it seems to be based in a very, it's kind of a negative thing. Christmas is about, you know, Christ and the birth of Christ, and of course retail is important, but I think businesses need consumers, they need customers. So why penalize a business that just happens to be owned in whole or part by a white person? Maybe that white person or Indian person or Asian person maybe pulled himself or herself up by the bootstraps, came from nothing, and started a business in a minority community. Don't we want to encourage white and Asian and all sorts of people to come into black communities to bring more dollars and investment? That way black people can come work there and maybe become a manager and ultimately take the shop over. Isn't that something good?
Well, yeah, that's good, but I think because black people in this country have had such an economic struggle. Remember, this is nothing new. Going all the way back to Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Rosewood, where blacks would try to start their own businesses, which could expand and could express the diversity that you're talking about, and a lot of those communities were destroyed. So with that being the case, we're still here in 2017, where now we realize the black dollar has economic power, as it always has.
Dollar?
And
when
maybe
you say a black, hold on, I say green dollars. What do you mean black dollars? I mean,
I definitely understand green dollars. I guess what I'm saying.
What I'm trying to say is a dollar spent at any store, retail outlet. I mean, that dollar goes into the business in the community. So I understand spend money in the community. I think that's great because it encourages more business, encourages more jobs and so forth. That's great. But it just seems antithetical to me to helping a community where people are coming in from all races and backgrounds, whether it's St. Louis or Detroit. Isn't it about welcoming people of all colors and backgrounds into different underprivileged, underserved areas and bringing all people together? Isn't that what Christmas is all about? Not like you're black, I'm white, you're Asian, let's all go to our own stores and go to our own separate places. To me, that's just wild after everything the country's been through.
I don't think that's the point. I know. I don't think that's the point, though. I think the point is that what they're saying, and let me go back to the black dollar thing. What I'm saying is that black people who have money, which is obviously green, that their dollars go into black businesses. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with saying that if you live in a certain community, let's support the businesses in the black community.
Well, that's different, but you're making it about race, and I I'm this is the stuff that's driving
not making it about race.
Crazy.
I haven't made
Black Lives Matter is making it about race. And when you say black people should shop only at black-owned stores, that is a racial statement at a time where our country is supposed to be uniting, coming together, especially at the holiday season. And if it was going to be really focused on only black businesses, why just focus during Christmas? Make it all year long, forever. Only go to black-owned stores, only go to black-owned businesses. Do it a whole year long. Let's really do it right.
I think it should be that way. I think it should be that way, but I think I think you're missing the point. I think you're missing the point. The point is No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there should be a diversity of dollars spent. But because of those people who are at a low economic level to build their dollar value up in other communities, they need to learn how to invest in their own business. I know you agree with that, Laura.
Everyone needs to learn to have a work ethic, save for a rainy day, and be open to people of different backgrounds and I just think the racial line is wild. I think it's like the opposite meaning of Christmas, at least to me, but that's my view.
I think that's how you see it. Yeah, I think you see it wrong.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much. And while Flynn's plea deal dominated the headlines, the FBI may have to investigate a new suspect in the Clinton email case. We're going to tell you why up next. The left is probably hoping the hubbub over the Mike Flynn guilty plea will drown out this story, but a group of congressmen is demanding that the FBI investigate alleged special treatment of Hillary Clinton during its investigation into her private email server. Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida sent a letter to FBI Director Christopher Wray asking the Bureau to explain its decision to investigate Clinton with a, quote, small team. What does that mean? The congressman joins us now. Congressman Gaetz, you've been all over this. People are saying, oh, you just don't understand when they say special investigation and small team, that's just routine kind of lingo. So you're making a big deal over nothing.
Well, Laura, we now have smoking gun evidence that Hillary Clinton got special treatment, and it's important to provide context. We've got Loretta Lynch on the tarmac with Bill Clinton. We've got Loretta Lynch telling James Comey to call this a matter and not an investigation. Then we've got James Comey sucking this up to headquarters and keeping the investigators in the Washington, D.C. office away from the Clinton investigation. And then he drafts the exoneration statement before even conducting the interview. In 6 days, the FBI director Director Christopher Wray will be before the House Judiciary Committee, and we need answers because Hillary Clinton didn't deserve special treatment. She should have been treated like every American, and now we know she was not.
Do you think that when they say special treatment and the way they designated it, it was just, from what you can see with all the things you just laid out, it was just kind of soft pedaling it or shortcutting it, or we know the conclusion, let's just put some window dressing on it so it looks like it's official, but let's wrap this baby up as fast as possible. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, that's what the evidence suggests. And when you look at the recent documents released about the tarmac meeting between Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton, the FBI was more worried about spin control and public relations and punishing the person that released this information than they were about the improper conduct of the Attorney General of the United States. And so time and again, we see from the Obama era that they were determining the outcomes before actually conducting the investigation. That's not what the American people deserve, and that's why we're going to fight for a real investigation.
Congressman, weren't they also desperate to find out who leaked the Clinton meeting on the tarmac with Loretta Lynch?
Absolutely. Recently discovered emails show that the FBI was very concerned about who let the American people know that Loretta Lynch was meeting with Bill Clinton, but they weren't at all concerned about the fact that the meeting had occurred and had jeopardized this very critical investigation. So we're really seeing a circumstance where the FBI, the Lynch Department of Justice, was engaged in a cover-up of their activities, all at the same time they were determining the outcome of the Hillary Clinton investigation before actually doing it.
All right, Congressman Gaetz, thanks for that update. Sarah Carter, let's go to you. It's good to see you again, of course, from Circa News. You've been all over this story. There's some concern that, well, what Gaetz is saying, well, it's not quite right because the word special, they designated a special investigation, can be used interchangeably in some cases with major investigation, because if it's a special inquiry, it's a major inquiry.
Correct.
So could that be what's kind of going on here?
Well, we don't really know until Christopher Wray talks. We don't really know whether that was designated from the Hoover term, special meaning major investigation. But what we do know is this. There were 110 confidential secret emails that were passed through 52 email chains. 8 of those emails were considered top secret. And if you just look at what Inspector General McCullough said in his interview recently with Catherine Herridge, she said, well, if anybody else would have done this, if you would have done this, where would you be? And he said Leavenworth. So a lot of FBI agents who were working at the time beating, on the ground, collecting information, not the top dogs, not Director Comey, not McCabe. They said that they felt that the rug had been pulled out from under them, that she was treated differently. And that I can tell you from interviews, extensive interviews that I've done.
From your sources. David, we've been talking about this for a long time. Are you at all convinced by what you heard from the congressman that designating this as a special investigation, the tarmac, you heard all the elements he laid out, that's significant in your mind at all?
So you got to kind of feel bad for Congressman Gaetz. He's trying to get attention for an FBI investigation that ended over a year ago on the same day that a major thing happened in the special counsel investigation, which is the former national security advisor pleaded guilty to crimes. That investigation is going forward, now finding evidence of crimes, finding indisputable evidence the national security advisor engaged in crimes. With Congressman Gaetz talking about something that's almost irrelevant now, going over the same old information that's been gone over many times. He has every right to make these inquiries, but they're not really going to go anywhere, and they're not germane to what's actually happening right now. But it's also very important to address this issue of special investigation. That's a term of art. If Congressman Gaetz talked to anyone in the FBI or the DOJ, they would have told them that's a term of art that's used to...
I made that point.
Yeah, you made that point. But it's used to describe an investigation of a very high-level person. It doesn't mean she got preferential treatment.
But it was odd. It was odd the way Comey decided to come out, right? With the first the announcement of the investigation, and then deciding, kind of writing the conclusion before they even had wrapped up the investigation. So I agree with you. Maybe the special designation is not such a big deal.
Right.
But it's the other facts that make the thing just odd. And you're right, it did wrap up a year ago. It doesn't mean that things during that investigation didn't happen that were kind of wacky. I mean, there was no notes taken during Hillary Clinton's questioning. that's just weird. Comey wasn't even there during her questioning. If it's a really major investigation of a major American political figure, don't you think Comey would have been there, present? Why wasn't he present? Never really heard a good answer to that. But you're right. Flynn did plead guilty to one count of lying to the FBI. There's no doubt about that.
But more importantly, he's now cooperating with the special counsel.
Yeah, he's cooperating
in an
on a
investigation
process crime.
That's probably going to lead to President Trump or Kushner or others.
Yeah, well, we shall see where it leads, but we talked about this in the previous segment. Let's talk about a possible entrapment. Speaking of this Flynn thing, they knew they were surveilling Ambassador Kislyak, the Russian ambassador. They were surveilling him, so they knew who he was talking to and what was being said, Sarah. And so why did they go to Mike Flynn? It's an interesting question. Why did the FBI decide to go to Mike Flynn and interview him about matters that they already had transcripts of? Isn't that interesting? I find that fascinating. You already had the transcripts. Well, you already knew what they talked about. So
that is fascinating, because you'd have to look at this as whether this was criminal or was this counterintelligence, because if they had a FISA on Kislyak, right, they would be watching Kislyak, trying to see.
They already knew what they talked about.
This is my question. How did they know to unmask all these specific numbers? And this is what a lot of people don't understand. I mean, when you're looking at these type of investigations, this is what you would have to know that number specifically. You'd have to have a reason to unmask it. So I'm tending to agree with you on this.
I just kind of thought about that tonight. It's just, you already know what he said. So why are you asking, well, did you have any conversations? Well, we already have the transcripts of the conversations. And was it the Russian dossier that helped unmask certain individuals leading up to this? We don't know this yet. But it's definitely not a happy day for the Trump administration. It's clearly not. I'm not trying to underplay it, but I'm not trying to jump to these huge inflammatory conclusions either, because I don't think that's smart. Thank you both. It's always great to have you on. And straight ahead, will Congress drop a tax cut in our Christmas stocking? Will they all be Grinches? We'll take you live to Capitol. You may be getting a Christmas gift from Uncle Sam this year. Wouldn't that be nice? Well, the Senate is poised to pass a tax reform bill. That's what they're calling it. It's a do-or-die agenda item for the Trump administration. And for more on where we are now, Chad Pergram, Fox News senior Capitol Hill producer, joins us from Capitol Hill. Chad.
Good evening. They are a couple of hours away, Laura, from actually voting on this bill. What we're looking at right now in Senate language is called the vote-a-rama. This is a series of votes that sometimes takes hours. It's just roll call vote after roll call vote after roll call vote as they get closer to a final vote on this, probably 1 or 2 in the morning here on Capitol Hill. We are expecting this to pass. We believe they have 51 yeas on the Republican side of the aisle. Bob Corker, the Republican senator from Tennessee, appears to be the only no. And Vice President Pence is going to come to the Capitol here in the next couple of hours. His vote is not expected to break a tie. You know, the Vice President, in his capacity as President of the Senate, can only vote if there is a tie. I'm told that he just wants to come to preside over the Senate when they presumably pass this sometime after midnight, Laura.
Okay, Chad, thanks so much for that update. And when we come back, I attended the White House Christmas party today for the press, and we'll share a candid or two and answer Sean Hannity's Christmas card challenge when we return. Now I'm watching this shot of all those senators, mulling around the Senate floor. What are they really talking about? Oh, they're playing Pokemon. Isn't that fun? Isn't that great? I was thinking about this. You got the House, the Senate, and the presidency all in Republican hands. Wouldn't it have been nice to have bolder, more aggressive, cleaner, and more transparent process here? A really aggressive tax cut, transformational one, easy to understand, simple for all of us to get. That would have been nice, but it's never the way it seems to go. It's amazing. Should have been that way, but it's better than nothing. They need to chalk up a win, and they're going to do that tonight. All right, I promise this. I wanted to show you a few shots from the White House Christmas party today. Oh, there I am next to what is that? That's just a tree, I guess. There I am with the Fox and Friends crew. I miss them because I don't go on with them anymore on Tuesdays because I'm too tired. And, my former boss, Ronald Reagan, I got a little emotional under that. Yeah, under that one. And there is Raymond Arroyo and a lamb chop. Well, there were several lamb chops. Well, I only got one there, but it was a good spread. That was pretty fun. Some people said it was funereal at the White House Christmas party, but it was not. We had a blast. And finally, Sean Hannity challenged me to allow you to pick my Christmas card photo this year. Now, he's on the cover of the New York Times Magazine this week. Check him out. Oh, very angry Sean. Now, he offered that cover and an old family photo. Now, check mine out. You can help me vote tonight on Facebook and Twitter. There's me on the left, 1995, and there's me on the right in 1960-something. Pick at Twitter and Facebook.
President Trump inches closer to an historic achievement.
This is a huge win for the American people.
Breaking news at this hour on tax reform in the Senate. We're all over it, from the political implications to what's in the deal for you.
Raises taxes on the middle class.
We'll fact check that Democratic talking point. Plus, you saw the immediate reaction right here last night.
This shocking verdict is the worst outcome for the Steinle family.
We'll break down Attorney General Jeff Sessions' brand new comments on sanctuary cities, following the not guilty verdict for an illegal immigrant deported multiple times who then shot and killed Kate Steinle.
This possibly violates the Roe Act.
These are very serious charges.
And is special counsel Robert Mueller about to build a case around a 218-year-old law that's never been successfully prosecuted? Our legal eagles debate the latest in the Mike Flynn case.
Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington, and this is a Fox News Alert. From General Michael Flynn cutting a deal to the Senate getting a much different deal done, we are all over it. We're live tonight, starting on the Senate floor, where Republicans appear ready to score their first major legislative victory of the Trump administration. But the White House is going to have to balance that against the news of former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn's guilty plea, with a special counsel investigating the Russia probe, complete with the mainstream media speculation that has already forced a major correction tonight by ABC News. In the Senate, Vice President Mike Pence is set to preside over the vote there, which is likely to take place in the wee hours of Saturday morning. The Vice President playing a key role in the lead up to the vote, hosting Republicans for a dinner just a couple nights ago where some of them were on the fence. But it appears his hard work is paying off. Let's bring in Fox News senior Capitol Hill producer Chad Pergram. All right, good evening to you, Chad. What is happening on the floor right now?
Well, this is what we call a vote-a-rama. Here's a vocabulary term where they go through vote after vote after vote, sometimes taking hours, and it's kind of the precursor to passing the bill, which will happen sometime maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. This is a question right now of when, not if. We believe that they have 51 votes, and they're going to pass this bill sometime later. Vice President Pence is coming, and his vote is not expected to be needed to break a tie. He's just going to preside over the vote. This is on a glide path. There's nothing that Democrats can do to stop this, and they're not pleased.
Historians will mark today as one of the darkest black-letter days in the long history of this Senate. This, unfortunately, is the metaphor for this bill and how high the stench is rising in this chamber as we debate the bill tonight. In my long career in politics, I have not seen a more regressive piece of legislation, so devoid of rationale.
What we're thinking here is that there's not going to be any Democrats who are going to vote for this bill. There were a couple of rumors going around the building that maybe some moderate Democrats up in 2018 might vote yes. That's not going to happen. In fact, one of those Democrats from a swing state told me that they thought that maybe the president, the White House, might have wanted some Democrats to vote yes, but that the Senate Majority Leader Shannon Mitch McConnell made the bill so bad that there was no way they could vote yes for this, and then Republicans could turn that against them.
All right, Chad, so what got us to this point where we are tonight and into the morning?
Well, the key was getting the votes, and obviously once you get the votes, you're ready to go, and that's where they are right now. We knew that they were, on this glide path, as I said once. Jeff Flake, the Republican senator from Arizona, signaled earlier today that he would vote for the bill. He was concerned about deficit reduction. That's something that turned Bob Corker, the Republican senator from Tennessee, off. He says, we're going to explode the debt here, and that's something that bothered him. Bob Corker is expected to be the only no vote on the Republican side of the aisle, 51-49. Something else that got Jeff Flake to yes was he got assurances from the leadership and the administration that they would address DACA, not in this bill, but this issue dealing with immigration and DACA sometime, he hopes, before the end of the year. And again, high drama here at the Capitol. We expect Vice President Pence to come and preside over that vote sometime, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, in his capacity as President of the Senate, Shannon.
Well, Chad, you're there 24 hours a day, no matter what is happening. We're very grateful for your input. Stay on it. We'll check back. Thank you, Chad. Well, tonight, retired 3-star General Mike Flynn denying what he calls false accusations of treason, while acknowledging he did lie to the FBI, and he's apparently agreed to cooperate with Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. James Rosen is here to tell us what this means in the bigger picture. Good to see you, James.
Shannon, good to see you. Good evening. He was once the top uniformed intelligence officer in the country. Tonight, Mike Flynn is the highest-ranking official to plead guilty in the Russia investigation. The former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency and White House National Security Advisor admitted lying to FBI agents during an interview in January. Flynn falsely claimed that he never asked Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak last December to refrain from escalating a diplomatic dispute with the U.S. at that time. Flynn also falsely claimed not to remember the phone call in which Kislyak reported that the Kremlin had agreed not to escalate. Flynn also falsely claimed he never asked Kislyak in a separate call to try to get Russia to veto a UN Security Council resolution targeting Israeli settlements. Flynn also claimed never to have heard back from Kislyak on that. Finally, Special Counsel Robert Mueller got Flynn to admit to materially false statements and omissions on federal disclosure forms about his work as a lobbyist for Turkey. Yet Mueller's prosecutors could find that these admissions will be used against Flynn if they place him on the witness stand to testify against higher-ups. The false statements involved, said presidential attorney Ty Cobb, mirror the false statements to the White House officials, which resulted in Flynn's resignation in February of this year. Nothing about the guilty plea or the charge, Cobb added, implicates anyone other than Mr. Flynn. Yet Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law and senior advisor, has been identified as the, quote, very senior transition official who was named in the plea agreement, who, quote, directed Flynn to contact Russian officials about the UN vote. Now, White House sources tell Fox News Kushner simply encouraged the entire team to work the issue. Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein of California said in a statement, this shows a Trump associate negotiating with the Russians before Donald Trump took office. That's a stunning revelation and could be a violation of the Logan Act. It's critical, Feinstein added, that we determine whether Flynn spoke with the Russians on his own initiatives. On the books since 1799, the Logan Act prohibits private citizens from conducting foreign policy without authorization. But Shannon, the last prosecution under the Logan Act was 165 years ago, and even that wasn't carried through.
So it's been a while, is what you're saying.
Let's just call it untested.
Okay, well, we'll see if this case is the test case. James Rosen, thanks for staying up late with us.
Thank you, Shannon.
Good to see you. All right, let's bring in our fair and balanced legal panel. Attorney Cleta Mitchell, who has been a key litigator in those IRS targeting cases, and Bradley Moss, who's a national security attorney. Welcome to you both tonight. Good to have you.
Good evening.
Thank you, Shannon.
I want to start because there's a big analysis now about what this plea deal does or doesn't mean. The fact that we're talking about one charge of lying versus all kinds of other things that we knew that Michael Flynn had been accused of. Kidnapping plots, not registering as a federal agent. Cleta, what does it say to you, this deal that we're seeing today? Is it just the tip of the iceberg, or is this all they have?
Well, it has to be all they have, because I think that the plea agreement this is the package. This is the package that was presented to the court today, and it's a process question. The thing that everybody needs to understand is that while this is very serious, there is a federal statute that makes it a criminal offense, a felony, to make a false statement to any federal agent. At the same time, if they had other criminal offenses to which they would have been expected to plead guilty, those would have been included today. They weren't. So this is it for Michael Flynn, and while it's regrettable, I think that it does underscore that, frankly, if this is all there is, and this took place, the interview with the FBI took place before Robert Mueller became the special prosecutor. This was a carryover from an Obama administration investigation. I think that raises a lot of questions about this whole Mueller investigation.
Well, Bradley, is it that there was a lot more that they potentially could have gotten Michael Flynn on, but because they've now got him giving them other information that was critical about this ongoing investigation and allegations about collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, that there was much more, but they got what they needed from him, and that's why the only thing we're seeing in the plea deal is this one charge?
Absolutely, Shannon. And so make sure to be distinguished here. This may be all that they had on Mr. Flynn in terms of criminal conduct he engaged in, but it's only, as far as I'm concerned, the tip of the iceberg of what they are getting from him in terms of material information that goes to the overarching investigation into possible Russian collusion. Doesn't mean that Mr. Flynn himself was engaged in any particular criminal activity, but he is, because he was in part of the inner circle, because he saw everything as on the campaign, during the transition, during the early days of the White House, he has significant information he can provide that would provide additional investigative leads for Mr. Mueller's investigation, and that would provide Mr. Mueller with the ability, with additional context, when he starts interviewing even additional members of the inner circle, such as Jared Kushner or Donald Trump Jr. So this may have been all that Mr. Flynn did in terms of criminal conduct, but this is not in any way the end of the investigation into possible Russian collusion.
Okay, I want to read something. Andrew McCarthy, a former federal prosecutor writing in National Review, had this to say. He said, if there was evidence of collusion, Mueller would not be permitting Flynn to settle the case with a single count of lying to FBI agents. Instead, we would be looking at a major conspiracy indictment, and Flynn would be made to plead to far more serious offenses if he wanted a deal. Cleta, it sounds like that's closer to your read on this.
It absolutely is. I mean, let's look at cases, other high-profile cases where individuals, let's talk about Scooter Libby for a moment. Remember the whole Valerie Plame brouhaha? Well, Scooter Libby ended up pleading guilty to a charge of making a false statement to the FBI. And as we now know, the entire Valerie Plame thing was just a media-incited phenomenon. It wasn't real. There was no there. And so I think what this does remind me, to remind everyone who's listening, when the FBI shows up at your door, there are two of them, there's one of you. Don't ever talk to any federal agent or FBI agent without an attorney present, because you can inadvertently say something that could end up being a felony charge. I don't know the circumstances of the interview with General Flynn. I do know that the FBI clearly had tapes of the conversations with the Russian ambassador and General Flynn. So the question arises, why did they need to interview him? I think there's a lot that is pretty sketchy about this, but it is what it is, and it's a serious thing, but I do think that it raises the question of the fact that there's not all the there that the media would have us believe.
Well, as an attorney myself, I think all three of us probably would agree, if you are approached about this kind of situation, best to have counsel before you say anything.
Always.
All right. Thank you both tonight. Great to see you on this Friday night. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Now, back to Capitol Hill. They're calling this a vote-a-rama on the Senate floor. It's the final series of votes clearing the way to an historic vote for tax cuts. Our next guest just cast some of his votes before heading to our camera. Georgia Republican Senator David Perdue is a yes on the bill. He stepped out to visit with us and tell us why. Senator, good to see you tonight.
Hi, Shannon.
Okay, I want to talk to you a little bit about the criticism, because you know there is plenty of it out there. Folks saying, even on your side of the aisle, Senator Bob Corker unable to vote for this because of his fiscal concerns about what it's going to do to the deficit. How do you answer those?
Well, Bob's a really good friend of mine. He and I both are very concerned about the long-term debt crisis that we have. I'm just more optimistic that this bill is going to ignite our economy. President Trump said job one this year was getting the economy going again. So we pulled back on regulations, unleashed our energy potential, and now tonight we have a historic opportunity to change this tax code and make American companies and workers competitive again with the rest of the world.
All right, we're going to break down some of the fact from fiction with an economist coming up a little bit later. But you know, what we're hearing are two completely different sets of talking points, because what we hear on the Republican side is this is going to help working families. It's going to be great for them. From the Democrats, we hear that that's all a lie. This is going to help rich old guys, and it's going to hurt lower and middle income people. Here is what Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said about your plans a little time ago.
The Republican Party is abandoning its long-held principles to please its political paymasters. It's a bad move for the Republicans, as well as a bad move for America.
Heard a lot from the Senate floor tonight. I heard Senator Bernie Sanders saying that you're essentially robbing the Treasury in the middle of the night while no one's watching. Senator Wyden also saying that essentially this is getting done, especially the health care part of it, without a single major hearing that's been public. So how do you respond to those criticisms from across the aisle?
Well, Shannon, over the last many months, we've had over 70 hearings in the Senate, open hearings about this issue of tax reform. But let's talk about American people that are going to benefit from this. A median income family of four today making $73,000 a year will have their taxes cut over 60%, Shannon. And a single mom with one child making $41,000 a year, which is a median income for a single worker, will get a 75% tax cut. And more importantly than that, over 3 million, some between 3 and 6 million people are estimated, will actually have their taxes go to zero. And more important than that, the best beneficiary of this is the person that will get a job because the economy is going to be ignited. President Trump has really pushed us and encouraged us and cajoled us to really make this thing where it will help American businesses grow. And I believe we've accomplished that. We are the highest corporate tax rate in the world. And the corporate tax rate, Shannon, is a huge penalty on the American worker. I know. I've lived in Asia. I've worked all over the world. We are going to become tonight more competitive with the rest of the world.
Do you think that once this goes to conference, because that's my understanding is that's going to be the path this takes with the House, there will be more transparency that will give the public a better look at exactly what's actually in the bill itself?
Well, I think that's true, but let me say this. This has been a fully transparent process. I mean, I hear the rhetoric tonight, but my goodness, this is coming from the same folks that said in the House a few years ago where Speaker of the House Pelosi said, hey, you gotta pass the bill to find out what's in it. This is the same group of folks that are making the comments tonight. Look, this has had an open process. This is regular order. We had it in committee. We had amendments. We're having amendments tonight. It'll go to conference, and all of this will be in the light of day. So this is a vote-a-rama. All of these vote-a-ramas go in the middle of the night like it always has. So there's nothing new here tonight.
Well, we hope you have a little caffeine over there. If that's your particular vice in getting through this, we know it'll be a late night and an early morning. Senator Perdue, thanks for taking a break to talk with us.
Thanks, Shannon.
Check out those sirens. That's Hawaii's nuclear warning system. It's the first state to bring back the Cold War era sirens, which will test about once a month. The sirens do actually sound slightly different than the ones they use for tsunamis and other disasters. Hawaii, of course, the closest state to North Korea, has got a high military presence as well and could be a target for the rogue regime. They want to be ready. Attorney General Jeff Sessions speaking out tonight on the not guilty verdict in the trial of an illegal immigrant who admitted to shooting and killing 32-year-old Kate Steinle. His comments next, and what he's now planning for sanctuary cities in the wake of the Steinle trial. Flowers tonight for Kate in California, vigils there as well as the impact of the verdict actually sets in across the country. President Trump's among those blasting a San Francisco jury's verdict in the Kate Steinle case. On Twitter, calling it, quote, a complete travesty of justice and urging Congress to now fund the border wall. Trace Gallagher's in Los Angeles to tell us more. Trace? All right, we're having a little bit of a technical difficulty with Trace, so let's do this. We know about the case last night. This individual who had been deported 5 times, 7 felony convictions. He was found not guilty of murder and involuntary manslaughter. He was convicted on 1 gun charge. So let's talk about that because last night's verdict renews a heated debate here on Capitol Hill, where in June, the House actually passed a measure stiffening penalties for illegal immigrants who commit crimes. 24 House Democrats crossed over to support the bill, but months later, the GOP-controlled Senate still has not taken up this measure.
What you have is a lot of Democrats who are going out of their way to protect these individuals, and that was the case that we have here in San Francisco.
That was Congressman Lee Zeldin. He was on our program last week, noting that the Senate Republicans, they've got to have 8 Democrats to help them pass this law, Kate's Law. So let's bring in our panel. Vince Colanese is the editorial director for the Daily Caller, and Isaac Wright is the former executive director of the pro-Hillary Clinton Super PAC, Correct the Record. You guys both have like 10 other jobs. We just don't have time to say them all when we're introducing you. So welcome. It's good to see you guys tonight. All right, let's talk about this. I want to play a little bit of what the defense attorney, he won this case, what he said this was about. There were a lot of political conversations around this case and the verdict last night. Here's what he said.
From day one, this case was used as a means to foment hate, to foment division, and to foment a program of mass deportation. It was used to catapult a presidency along that philosophy of hate.
Vince, I'll let you take the first swing at that.
Well, what does politics exist for if not to address issues that need to be solved in our communities? This is clearly one of them. I mean, this case has cemented San Francisco's status as a city that it both disregards the law and doesn't have a capacity to enforce it, apparently. Because you have a case go before a court, and they can't even find him guilty of involuntary manslaughter, which by its very definition is what occurred here. They charged him with possession of the weapon. What more did they need to do in order to prove that this was involuntary manslaughter? This is a monumental miscarriage of justice, and now the federal government's going to take a stab at it.
Yeah, and in fact, we had the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, talking about this with Tucker a short time ago. We want to play that, and then we'll get your reaction, Isaac.
We are confident, and we are going to do everything possible to ensure that happens, although there are some potential other charges that could be brought against him. And before being deported and released, we think he should face every charge that is proper to be brought against him. And you can be sure our Department of Justice is working right now to bring any charges that are appropriate.
So, Isaac, it then sparks this conversation again here in Capitol Hill about building the wall, about DACA is something that the Democrats want to, sort of negotiate over with the government spending next week when we run out of money. It changes the immigration debate, at least for a few days after this verdict.
Yeah, well, I think this is more of a criminal justice issue than an immigration issue. The defense's argument, from what I've read, seems to have some holes in it potentially, but hopefully if there's a federal charges brought, they can sort that out. As far as the relation to immigration, I mean, the question here, when he was held and released by the local authorities in California, he was being held on a drug charge. He was a nonviolent offender up until that point. Now there is, of
He
course,
did have 7 felony convictions.
yeah, absolutely.
And
this
5
is somebody.
deportations. They
This
were
is
looking
somebody
for
who
him for
was
the
a
6th
criminal.
deportation.
Absolutely, he was a criminal, and he did not need to be here.
But Isaac,
he was
to
a
say,
criminal.
to
That's
say that,
absolutely right.
To say that it's not an immigration issue, though, I mean, the predicate to this is the immigration policy, and San Francisco immigration policy specifically, is the reason he was in the country and murdered an American woman. This wouldn't have been a criminal justice issue if he was kept out of the country.
But that's exactly the problem. Why are our cities having to set our national immigration policy? That shouldn't be the responsibility of San Francisco. That shouldn't be the responsibility of any one city. That's where Congress has failed to pass comprehensive immigration reform, and we're pushing that duty onto cities, and we're leaving it to cities' discretion of what to do. And the problem is...
But when they decide they're not going to cooperate with federal requests, these detainer requests, where they know this guy has been in and out of the country 5 times, 7 felony convictions, and then they've got a request from the feds, from the immigration officials, hold on to him, and they say, nope, we're just going to let him go, and then this happens.
So that's exactly the problem of where people are missing the background. I used to work in state government, and I can tell you, folks who work in state government and municipal government frequently get frustrated with Washington Beltway thinking, the fact that Washington is out of touch with what's happening in the rest of America. We pay federal taxes for Congress to set an effective immigration policy, which they have failed to do. We pay federal taxes for the administration and for ICE specifically to enforce immigration policy, which they are failing to do. Instead, they're passing the buck to municipalities and to states and saying, look, we know it's not your job, it's ours, but while we're too incompetent or unwilling to do the job, we're going to ask that local law enforcement handle this. And when somebody is pulled over for a speeding ticket or for a marijuana cigarette and they're an undocumented immigrant, hold them in your jail and use the resources for that instead of known murders and rapists and prisoners that will be let out in their place.
But this guy did have multiple convictions, you know that, and when they were letting him go, the feds had asked that he be held. They knew there was a risk this guy was going to, continue to be in this country illegally, could potentially commit other felonies. So how is that the feds' fault that they let him go?
The feds' fault that they weren't there to pick him up. Right? That's part of the problem.
But they said, you hold him and we'll come get him.
You cannot ask these, but the problem is, when you, in practice,
these state prisons, these municipal jails, are left often for weeks or months waiting on somebody to come pick these prisoners up. So in those weeks or months, while you have somebody who is
this is silly. This is silly because
you're going to let that person.
This is silly. The states are not setting immigration law here. The federal government is. The federal government had custody of him, handed him over to state authorities to prosecute that state case, and then they just sent him out into the street. They didn't give him back to the federal government.
Well, I think we can all agree that the system is broken and it needs some kind of fixes,
Indeed.
one way or the other, and how that gets done is where the devil is in the details. So good to see you both.
Thank you.
Thank you so
And
much.
now you're ready for Friday night to go out after getting your blood pressure up. All right. We are monitoring that vote-a-rama on Capitol Hill as the Senate nears approval of a potentially historic tax cut bill. It would be a major victory for President Trump. Coming up, as another lawmaker's secret sexual harassment settlement is unveiled, there is a bipartisan effort to unmask every lawmaker who has spent your money to make these harassment cases disappear.
Enough is enough. Members of Congress who commit these egregious acts or congressional staffers should not be allowed to hide behind closed doors, anonymity, and these non-disclosure agreements while taxpayers have essentially been forced to pay for their misconduct.
And by the way, if you are confused about exactly what's in the Senate tax bill, you're not alone. Our next guest has been studying all the fine print, so he's going to separate fact from fiction about what the law could actually mean to your wallet. Stay with us.